Hi and welcome to Prepping Essentials. I've covered the topic of bulk food storage in a few different videos so far, but this video is a result of some comments that I've had on a selection of videos that have touched on the subject of bulk food and, more importantly, what do you do with all those rice and beans? So let's find out. If you've looked at any of my previous videos on the subject of long-term food storage, you'll see that the range of stuff that preppers put aside is endless. There's always lots of canned goods, whether that's your vegetables, peas, carrots, beans, potatoes, tomatoes is a very frequent one. Endless supplies of sauces, different kinds of sauces, including pasta sauce or curry sauce. There are meals in a can, such as ready-made chilli or spaghetti bolognese. There's also plenty of meats in cans, whether that's pre-packaged stew types in gravy, or whether that's things like hot dog sausages, canned hams, good old spam, and of course fishes such as sardines and mackerel. And there's lots of staples. Meals in a can, beans and sausages is a very common one. In addition to that, you should never overlook the convenience stuff. So there's lots of ready-made packet pasta sauces. You'll have seen one of those on a previous video not too long ago. And ramen noodles, of course. Lots of different types of noodles, spaghettis and so on. One thing that sometimes is overlooked is condiments and stocks, so things like beef stock cubes, vegetable stock cubes, chicken, so on and so forth. Your oils for cooking, olive oil. Seasonings, so various types of spices, salts and peppers, and just to add flavouring, things like lemon sauce, and especially favourite of preppers is the soy sauce. So don't ignore those. But today the thing that I really wanted to concentrate on was the long-term bulk stuff that will last forever. And again, I've touched on this in previous videos. You'll have seen in one of my videos that when I lived on a boat, because of the space constraints and the expense actually also, I recycled soda bottles, and I've got varieties of different types of long-term storage in those bottles. So I've got sugar, I've got yellow lentils, red kidney beans, butter beans, rice, porridge oats and red lentils. And what I tend to do now that I've not got the space constraint of the boat, even though I have to say my house isn't particularly big, I've moved over to bulk storage in buckets. So you can get obviously a lot more in these, they're stackable, and if you put your oxygen absorbers in there, you don't need the expense of the Mylar bags or vacuum sealers. So beans and rice are staples, as are pasta and porridge oats, and something that is overlooked from time to time but is extremely convenient, things like instant mashed potato. Good shelf life on these for a couple of years. I always buy the one where you don't need to add milk, you just add water straight out of the pan, so you're not messing around trying to reconstitute milk. But I do, and you'll have seen this in previous videos, always keep stocks of dried milk. It's especially useful when you're trying to make things like porridge. There's nothing worse than porridge just made with water. So I always keep some skimmed milk if I can get it full fat, but it's very difficult to find, and I can reconstitute that with water. But today I wanted to address the subject of your beans and rice, predominantly because I've had a few questions in previous videos kind of along the lines of, well, it's great storing all these dry beans, so kidney beans, lentils, butter beans, whatever, and of course your rice, but what can you make from those? So that's what we're going to kind of look at, and I'll do a little bit of a recipe for you. So we've grabbed an assortment of long-term food storage stuff out of the cupboards. But before I get into the recipe for what we're cooking today, I wanted to just highlight a couple of things. First of all, obviously I'm in the kitchen. If you were outdoors, off-grid, you might want to invest in some cast iron cookware. This can take the heat of an open fire far better than your traditional household cooking pots can. You've probably seen me, I've used this for baking bread in previous videos. These are excellent items. They're not very big, but they're big enough for small meals for 2-3 people. Clearly this is good enough for baking full-size loaves of bread. So if you are thinking about off-grid cooking, cast iron pots and pans are the way to go. I think I only paid something like £29 for this set. So you can use it like that as a Dutch oven, you can use it like that as a normal pot or a frying pan, or indeed as I do for baking bread. So I just wanted to highlight that as one of the things before I got started. Other thing is we're using long-term food stores. We're not using fresh produce per se. Now, with that in mind, I wanted to just highlight some of the things that you might use as fresh produce in lots of your cooking. Things like garlic and onions. We're coming to the time of year now, it's April, where we should really be planting a garden. And the point of long-term food storage, your cans, your dried beans and your rice, is really to tide you over when something hits the fan long enough so that you can set up, if you haven't already, your own food production, whether that's growing vegetables, raising chickens, rabbits, whatever, or going out and hunting for your meat. So the thing about garlic and onions, they're really dead easy to grow and they don't take much space. Indeed, your garlic, you literally are just popping that in the ground and it will grow. So I thought I'd highlight that before I went any further. But for the purposes of this, we're not using fresh produce, we're using whatever we've got in our long-term food storage. So what have we got? Well, I did touch on it earlier. It's beans and rice, so we've got red kidney beans. I use these smaller jars to rotate out stocks of my dried bulk foods. These are very easy to keep just in the side of the kitchen, and I can use them on a daily basis, as indeed I can the rice. Problem with dried beans is that they need reconstituting. You need to soak them in water. I actually do that overnight, so thinking ahead a little bit, here's one I prepared earlier. So we've got a bowl here. There's actually half a cup of the red kidney beans in here. It's been soaking overnight. You can tell by the colour of the water, so I just need to quickly rinse that off. And in terms of rice, same quantity. There's half a cup there of the rice, so I don't need these. So I'll quickly just rinse these off and then we'll get started. In terms of the other ingredients, I'll touch on those as we go along. Okay, so I've rinsed off the kidney beans. So you can see those there, they're ready to go. So half a cup of kidney beans, half a cup of plain white long grain rice. Now we are going to need some liquid so that the rice can absorb the liquid. Normally what you have with rice is it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So there's half a cup of rice there, so we need a full cup of water. However, we are going to be adding some other ingredients such as these tinned tomatoes and this tin of stewing steak. So there is liquid in there, so we're not going to need a full cup of water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix some stock. Depending on what you're cooking, you could use chicken stock, vegetable stock, but since we're using stewing steak, I'm going to use beef stock, and I'm going to put a cube of beef stock into a jug there, and then I'm going to add 1 cup of boiling water just to dissolve that stock cube. and we'll use it as we go, as we're cooking, and depending on how much of the rice is, how much water the rice is absorbing will depend on how much of this cup of stock we'll end up using. There's 1 cup there. So we'll let that dissolve in there. And we'll use it as we go along for soaking up the ingredients in the rice. First and foremost, kidney beans. These are raw kidney beans, so they're going to need cooking off before we add the other ingredients. So I'm simply going to drop those into a pan and add that stock water, and I'll let those just simmer away and pre-cook before I add the rest of the ingredients. That's our stock done now. We will lose some of this liquid as the beans are cooking, so again we'll just have to keep an eye on it as we're going along and adding water if we need to, if we think that there's not enough there for the rice. So I'll put that onto the cooker and start boiling that off, and then we'll come back and we'll add the other ingredients as we go along. While the kidney beans are cooking away, I'll just talk briefly on the subject of meat. For this meal I'm using this pre-packaged, it's a stewing steak in gravy, comes in a can. It is pre-cooked, so you can, if you want, just rip the lid off and eat it as it is. I'd rather warm it up though, personally. But you could use whatever you have in your long-term food storage in terms of meat. Spam is a great thing to use. You can simply slice it up and fry it as it is, as part of a meal. Or if you wanted to make something in a one-pot kind of meal like we're doing, then you could simply chop this up into small cubes and it would be a substitute for this stewed steak. Other stuff you could possibly use, good old tinned hot dogs. But bear in mind what I said back at the start, your long-term food storage is to get you out of the crap when something hits the fan, and to keep it going long enough until you've got a substitute in place, such as growing your vegetables and rearing some kind of livestock, chickens, rabbits, whatever, for meat. The hunting option is a real good option, depends where you live as to what's going to be available to hunt. And I'll give a bit of a shout out now to a friend of mine who is a bit of a specialist when it comes to hunting game. His YouTube channel is COVID Hunter, and if you pop along to there you'll see lots of videos of not only him out hunting for things like rabbits and pigeons and squirrels, wildlife that is accessible to pretty much everybody and which is a good source of food, but you'll also see him actually cooking the wildlife that he actually goes out and hunts. So shout out for there, COVID Hunter, really good channel for anyone who is interested in, or is indeed doing now, hunting for small game. And more especially, it gives you a lot of hands-on demonstrations of what to do with those animals once you have actually got them, and how to turn them into a meal. Something like pheasant or rabbit or pigeon would be excellent food source when something hits the fan, and you don't have to rely then on your long-term food stores, or indeed to replace those once they've run out. So COVID Hunter, COVID Hunter on YouTube, have a little look and see what he's got going there. Okay, so our red kidney beans went into the pan, brought to the boil, and then they've just been simmering in there for, it's almost 20 minutes now actually. And we're ready to start adding the other ingredients. When you are cooking these, please do keep checking them and stirring them around. They will stick to the bottom if you leave them on their own devices for more than 2 or 3 minutes, so don't walk away and leave them for 20 minutes. make sure that you're continually checking and just stirring as you go along. So we're going to drop in now a can of chopped tomatoes. It really is that easy. And we've got this can of stewing steak. You're probably going to need a little knife to just whiz around the edge and tip that in. Make sure you get it all in. Want to make sure we get as much as we can out. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier to drop a little bit of water in there and swish it around just to get the last bits out the bottom. Get your money's worth. So we'll just give that a stir up. Make sure that it's all mixed together nicely. None of it's clumping up together. If you can see that or not. Now's the time to pop in some seasoning. Now again, it's personal taste. Bit of salt in there. Bit of black pepper in there. Give it a little bit of a stir around again. Now if you want to go all exotic, if you like your food to be hot, you could add some little chili granules. Don't want to get too carried away there. And again, just stir that around. We'll pop the lid back on. We'll give it another 5 minutes, I guess, just to warm through before we add the rice. So we've left that for 5 minutes just to bring it back to the boil again and just turned it down to a simmer. Don't forget to keep stirring this, otherwise it will stick to the bottom. So whilst that was heating through, all I've done is I've got my half cup of rice and I've rinsed it thoroughly just to get rid of that excess that you get with rice. It does get all milky and full of starch, so I've rinsed that off. Literally just going to pop that into the pan as it is there. Just wipe around and get it all in. And then stir that in. Again, we're stirring to make sure that it is completely mixed in there. And now we're going to leave that, hard to gauge, but I'm guessing probably about 15 minutes, just on a very low simmer for the rice to absorb the water and fluff up. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. Okay, so that's had 20 minutes. Kept my eye on it all the way through, kept stirring it to make sure it doesn't stick. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's a very thick consistency. Spit it out. It's not a soup, it's a lot thicker than a stew. So the heat's gone off. I'll just let that rest there for a second while we get ready to plate up, and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so what we definitely need with this is some fresh bread. I baked this yesterday, so it is nice and fresh. You'll have seen this in a previous video that I did. You can't beat bread. In fact, I'm going to have the crust as well, because I really do like the crust. Pop that out the way. And then all we need is our meal. A little bit more, I think. But as you can see, there's certainly enough there for several people. There's no way that I'm going to eat all of that in one sitting. So there we are, your suggested meal from your long-term food storage. Bon appetit. The amount of different meals that you can make from your long-term food storage is really only governed by your imagination. You can have soups, stews, spaghetti bolognese, chilies, rice and meat, or meat with vegetables. The list is pretty much endless. If there is anything that you would like to see made up from things like rice and beans, do let me know by dropping a comment in the comment section below, or indeed anything else to do with long-term food storage. Well, that's it for this video. I hope that you found something in there that was of use to you. If you did like the video, please do click the like button, and also feel free to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. As always, love to hear any comments or questions or suggestions you might have about the topic of this video, or indeed any other video that you've seen. But for now, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.